Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. My name is Lisa Furr. I use she, her pronouns. I serve as co-chair of the worship and as a member of the Shared Ministry Committee. We are a welcoming community where we strive to transform ourselves and the world through love, wonder, and connection. We'd like to thank the Cawthorn Consort for our music today, along with our own Susan Baggett, and we are thrilled to have y'all here. Thank you so much. We welcome back to our pulpit Reverend Janet Oney, who is a retired UU minister, and her husband is here somewhere. There you are. Hey. She lives in Stanton, so we enjoy having you come up. Next week, our own minister, Reverend Sarah Goodman, will return to our pulpit, and we'll be glad to have her back as well. Whether you're here for the first time or the 1,000th time, or you can't even remember how many times you've been here, welcome. Whatever you are facing in your own life, welcome. This is a place where we try our best to be real with one another, to get through hard things together, and to remind ourselves and one another of the values that ground us, center us, that motivate and move us. Whoever you are, whatever your faith journey, whomever you love, you are welcome here. We welcome all who seek to know the sacred and all who seek to make our world more just. Our commitment is to be together in covenant, to live out our values, and to work together towards our mission. These are what make our church. The mission of this church is to transform ourselves and the world through love, wonder, and connection. Please rise in body or in spirit to join me in our affirmation of who this community is, beginning with that all-important word, love is the message of this church, and service is our way. This is our great covenant together, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please join us in our opening hymn, We Would Be One, number 318 in the gray hymnal.
Amen. Please join me in saying our chalice words as Lisa lights our chalice. What if the flame that burns in the chalice of our faith is nothing less than the ember of hope and nothing more than love set ablaze? What if it's about sparking potential and possibility into existence? What if we dare? Please join me now in our time of meditation and prayer. Find a comfortable place for your body, noticing your breathing, finding your center. Take a moment to just be. Allow stillness to settle in. Spirit of life and love, known by many names, and yet fully known by none, we give thanks for this time and this place of renewal. We are grateful for the ability to learn and grow, to let the spirit of love and truth work its transformation upon us and within us. Grant us a sense of being at peace in the world, even as we are in motion. Let us cultivate together the strength to welcome every kind of gift and all manner of ways to be on the journey together. To this, we add the silent prayers of our hearts. Amen. I don't have any prayer cards this morning. So as we come together every Sunday from our own separate lives and our own separate homes, we bring with us a variety of joys and sorrows, fears, and hopes. We take time in our service now to honor those big feelings together. We take this time in a contemplative time, each of us given an opportunity to share within the community and what lifts us up and what weighs us down. Today we will light candles of joy and hope to lift up the bright things in our lives. And we will also place stones to hold our sorrows and fears, to ease the weight from our spirits. In a moment, I will invite you to come participate in this ritual on your own. But first, if you would like someone to light a candle for your joy, raise your hand. If you would like someone to place a stone for your sorrow, please raise your hand. Anyone who would like to come forward may do so now. We light one final candle for all the joys that remain in our hearts, and we place a final stone for all the remaining sorrows this morning. Please join in our sung prayer response, "There is a love." There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Amen. And hi there, my name is Adina Danuf. I use she or they pronouns, and I am your Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration. And our guest speaker, Janet Oni, today asked me to share with you about someone special. So I'm sharing a shortened version. Professors, please forgive me. It's kind of like Cliff Notes. But the original story is by Janine Groschmeyer. And the story is about Maria Cook, who was born in 1779 when the United States of America was still working on becoming a country. Now, during her early lifetime and the early years of the U.S. came about the Constitution, which simply put said that some people had the right to choose what they believe in and the right to speak out for what they believe.
So Maria chose to believe in a religion called Universalism. Sound familiar? Yeah. A religion that said that God loved all people, everyone in the universe, no matter what. Now, some other religions said it didn't matter if people did good things or bad things, that God only chose a few to love, and that was it. But Maria didn't believe that. So when she grew up, she decided to speak out for what she believed. She talked to everyone about universalism. Everyone. The story said she talked to people in their houses, she talked to people on the street, she talked to people in the stores. Do any of you maybe have partners like that? I'm seeing some nods. And then she started talking to people in church. And not just after church or before church, but during church. She actually went up to the pulpit where the preachers were going and started talking about universalism. And this was back in the day, so people were like, and they started talking about her, right? Because back then, women were not supposed to really talk in public, but Maria preached anyway. So she spoke out about what she believed in, and she traveled from town to town preaching universalism. And lots of people came to listen, even though she was a woman. And she spoke so well that many people actually started believing universalism too. So then in 1811, a Universalist church actually gave Maria Cook a letter of fellowship. That was not heard of. So today we remember her as the first woman to be a Universalist preacher. But not everybody liked that, right? So they didn't want her there. In 1813, she was arrested. And the police came. She didn't argue. She didn't resist. But she didn't help either. Maria refused to walk. So the police had to pick her up and carry her to a wagon, and if any of you have ever met a toddler, you can envision this, right? You know? So they drove the wagon to a place called Cooperstown, and then they had to carry her out of the wagon to see the judge as well. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. So in the courtroom, she spoke out and she told the judge that. I'm still getting toddler vibes here, you know? She told him she didn't recognize his authority, that she did not think he had the right to judge her, and she refused to answer his questions. And now we're moving into that "you're not the boss of me" territory. So for that, the judge sentenced her to jail. And guess what? She wouldn't walk in there either, so the police had to pick her up and carry her into the jail, and once she was there, guess what else she started to do? She started to talk to everybody in the jail. She talked to the police, she talked to the prisoners, she talked to everyone she met about universalism, and she just kept right on preaching. My family would say this is me trying to leave on a Sunday morning, right? So after a few weeks, the judge let her go, and Maria continued traveling to different towns and preaching about universalism. All her life, Maria Cook spoke out for what she believed in and did what she thought was right. She didn't yell, she didn't push, she didn't hit, she just spoke out. The Universalist religion that Maria Cook talked about is a part of our own heritage and part of our religion's name, right? Unitarian, Universalist. Look at y'all knowing your U's. And like Maria Cook, we believe that everyone should be able to speak out for what's right and true in the world. And no one should be put in jail for doing that. So now I'm going to speak out and say Isla and I are headed to class. Thank you.
Please join me in our offering and acknowledging all of the ways we give to this church and this world. Because we give because this is our church, and we value what it does for us, to us, and through us, to our community and the world. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of our church inside and outside these walls. May we give in love and hope. Thank you. And thank you for your offering and for all the ways you give to our life and ministry with your time, talent, treasure, and trust. Together, all of our gifts allow us to expand and strengthen the tapestry of love, wonder, and connection that blesses this church and transforms us and our world.
The following reading is from a letter Benjamin Rush wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1800. Rush was the most important founding father that you never heard of. He was the only Universalist signer of the Declaration of Independence. Hear now his words. I agree with you, likewise, in your wishes to keep religion and government independent of each other. Were it possible for St. Paul to rise from his grave at the present juncture, he would say to the clergy who are now so active in settling the political affairs of the world, cease from your political labors. Your kingdom is not of this world. Read my epistles. In no part of them will you perceive me aiming to depose a pagan emperor or replace a Christian upon the throne. Christianity disdains to receive support from human governments. From this, it derives its preeminence over all the religions that ever have or ever shall exist in the world. Human governments may receive support from Christianity, but it must be only from the love of justice and peace, which it is calculated to produce in the minds of men. By promoting these and all the other Christian virtues by your precepts and example, you will much sooner overthrow errors of all kind and establish our pure and holy religion in the world than by aiming to produce, by your preaching or pamphlets, any change in the political state of mankind. Benjamin Rush. Thank you. A little over a month ago, on July 4th, I had the privilege of attending the naturalization ceremony at Monticello, where 74 people from 36 countries around the world became new American citizens. It was a long, hot morning, not particularly conducive to close attention to the speeches. What did strike me, though, was the oath of citizenship, where 74 people in accented English promised, among other things, to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What struck me about this oath was that it was undertaken with the presumption of shared values, regardless of the diverse backgrounds and experiences. Well, since then, a lot has changed. One national political party has confirmed their choice for their presidential and vice presidential candidates. The other political party saw their presidential candidate drop out of the race. A new candidate launched their campaign, and just this week announced their vice presidential running mate. Throughout the process, values were expressed. Values were expressed in a yet-to-be-published report entitled Project 2025, in the candidates' campaign speeches, by the pundits and pollsters, and by people talking over dinner tables in grocery stores and gas stations, in barber shops and nail salons and coffee shops, and even in religious communities. Today I want to talk about values, our Unitarian Universalist values. For those who missed it, last June, our General Assembly voted to restate our 7 principles as 6 values Here they are: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity, also known as jet pig. But even though ascribing to these values, many Unitarian Universalists, and indeed many progressive groups, go quiet in the face of a cruel remark or forceful untruth or breathtaking statement of opinions from leaders we were taught to respect. This morning I want to explore why this is so. I also want to consider the folly of separating personal values from the duties our elected officials and appointed officials have to make and enforce laws that advantage all the people in all their diversity. And I want to suggest ways in which we might move forward to a more perfect union, finding and using our prophetic voice. Now, throughout history, prophets have stood at the corner of church and state. Their calling is to speak truth to power, pass judgment on cultural and political norms, and urge us to be better than we are. There has never been much reward in prophecy. No one wants to hear that the end is near and it's your fault. Through the ages, we have managed to rid ourselves of our public prophets through crucifixion, imprisonment, burning at the stake, or shooting them, or simply ignoring them. At the very least, a modern prophet who takes seriously the charge to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable risks losing their job. None of us comfortable people wish to be afflicted. There are, of course, exceptions. The Reverend Dr. William Barber, with his Moral Monday movement, is the first that comes to mind. But for the most part, we don't often speak to our moral outrage with much force or consistency. Why? I have an idea that one reason is because we don't want to be like them. Them, whose opinions are emotionally rooted and whose voices seem to dominate the public square. But the liberal religious voices not only have a place in public discourse, it has an urgent responsibility to proclaim our liberal religious values. Well, what is liberal religion? Let's define it. Liberal religion has two distinctive characteristics. The first is a posture of intentional engagement with modern culture. Generally, we try to live in the current age rather than pining for the good old days. The other characteristic of liberal religion is an acceptance of religious pluralism. Because of these two characteristics, we face four dilemmas that choke us up in the public square, and I'm going to unpack each one of them. Dilemma number one is that the theological tensions inherent in religious liberalism sometimes cause us to stumble over our best intentions. Traditionally, the prophet stands both inside and outside of society. They straddle the corner of church and state. The problem is that cultural adaptation, the very trait that defines us as religious liberals, can easily lead to familiarity and comfort. We belong to the very establishment that we're seeking to critique, so overturning the existing system would be contrary to our own individual and institutional interests. In other words, it's like asking us to chew off our own leg to escape from a trap. The second dilemma that hinders our liberal prophetic practice is the ongoing debate about the proper role of religion in the public square. We need to get past our prejudice that speaking religiously in public is something that proper Unitarian Universalists simply don't do. we're almost hysterically concerned about appearing to proselytize, even though articulating our values without an attempt to convert someone to our way of thinking, that's a far cry from proselytizing. So far, we've identified two factors that keep us relatively quiet in the public square: theological tension and pluralism, and our abhorrence of emotionalism and proselytizing. The third dilemma that affects our prophetic practice is the question, what does it mean to speak religiously? Now, this is a complicated question for us because we have so many sources of moral and ethical guidance. One spokesperson is the Reverend Dr. William Barber, the founder of the Moral Mondays movement that I referenced previously. Reverend Barber's grounding is in Christian theology, specifically Psalm 94, which says, "Who rises up against me against the wicked? Who stands up for me against evildoers?" Barber links secular politics with religious justifications, at the very least, giving legislators an alternative religious perspective that counterbalances the arguments that religious conservatives have long been making. The fourth dilemma is the tension that emerges from our commitment to the separation of church and state. I have come to believe that it's simply not possible for individuals to leave their values aside while going about the business of the state. I do think it's possible and imperative that we separate the institutions of church and state. Institutions are designed to hold ideas and resist change. But within these institutions are individuals. Our elected and appointed leaders can, and they should, set aside religious affiliations in going about the business of governance. But it's very difficult to separate oneself from one's values. And I'm going to suggest why this is so in just a minute. Let's recap before we leave the reasons that we go quiet in the face of loud, emotional expressions of values not shared by us. Liberal religious voices have been ineffective in the public square, first because we seem wishy-washy. We hold various theological positions, and we embrace pluralism. Second, we are mightily uncomfortable with emotionalism and proselytizing. Third, we don't agree on speaking about religion in public, perhaps hearkening back to the days where it was impolite to speak of religion and money. And fourth, we can't agree on the details of what it means to separate church and state. So, although these four dilemmas are important, I think the fifth is the most immediate. That is the challenge of engaging in public prophetic practice under the conditions of empire. Unlike the empires of the past, the American empire of the 21st century relies on indirect influence through various forms of pressure and intervention. America's empire, unwritten constitution, sanctions vast public and private powers limited only by opportunity and ambition. To sustain the empire, it's necessary to keep citizens in a generalized feeling of insecurity and powerlessness. And this is true of all empires. A generalized feeling of insecurity and powerlessness. Does this sound familiar? Now, add to this mix the tactics of sowing division between groups of people, and you have the cultural and political climate of 2024. And the sowing of division is not just now and not just in the United States. This is a global phenomenon, and it's as old as humanity itself. Countering the empire's tactics requires that we change our minds about what we truly value. I told you I would attempt to explain why it's so difficult to change a person's mind, why lawmakers and law enforcers can't just park their values as they go about their duties. There's been a lot of research into where values come from and why it's hard for people to change. Researchers have shown that the human species has survived by belonging to a collaborative group, a hypersocial niche in the scheme of things. Reason evolved to solve problems posed by living in these collaborative groups, not to evaluate data. Let me say that again. Reason evolved to solve problems posed by living in collaborative groups. Reason did not evolve to evaluate data. So, enter confirmation bias, a form of faulty thinking that leads people to embrace information that supports their beliefs formed in their groups and reject information that contradicts them. People experience genuine pleasure, a rush of dopamine, when processing information that supports their beliefs. Confirmation bias doesn't threaten expulsion from your group. That's why the practice of shunning is so effective. The pressure to conform to group norms is built in all of us, even Unitarian Universalists. In the political arena, confirmation bias is complicated by what's called the illusion of explanatory depth. Now, this is just a shorthand way of saying that people believe that they know more than they actually do. As a rule, strong feelings about an issue don't emerge from a deep understanding of that issue. Everything is always more complex than is presented by the media. So far, we've heard that the reasons that we are so quiet at the corner of church and state. We've taken a cursory look at the research showing why it's so difficult to change core beliefs and worldviews with facts and logic. So, where do we go from here? How will we move toward a more perfect union? I have some suggestions. First, we Unitarian Universalists need to clarify our religious identity. We cannot stand at the corner of church and state unless we have a clear understanding of why prophetic social justice is religious work. And the overarching principle of religious liberalism is rooted in a commitment to radical human equality. This was best articulated in Universalism's core theological insight, which is all humanity, indeed all of creation, is ultimately united in a common destiny. Let me say that again. All humanity, indeed all of creation, is ultimately united in a common destiny. This is what Benjamin Rush, the Universalist signer of the Declaration of Independence, believed and acted upon. As we identify who we are as Unitarian Universalists, we need to form alliances with other liberal religious groups. This means that we need to get over our knee-jerk negative response to people calling themselves Christians. UU theologian James Luther Adams warned about confusing the teachings of Jesus with the teachings about Jesus. The liberal wing of each mainline Christian denomination. Some people are now distinguishing themselves from the so-called Christians by identifying themselves as Jesus followers. In fact, our own UU Christian Fellowship's tag is freely following Jesus. Another thing that we can do to move toward a more perfect union is to respond with kindness and understanding to people yearning for the comfort that clarity about rules and consequences bring. I think one of the reasons that so many of us are so frightened and so unhappy is that we thought so many of the issues that we fought for, abortion, marriage equality, voting rights, rule of law for everyone, we thought those were settled. Now, imagine how frightened and unhappy people might be who see what they thought was settled, the primacy of white men, marriage between a man and a woman, the very definition of male and female, the inferiority of the other, the belief in the efficacy of pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps, and the inevitable reward of hard work. All of that is being challenged. No wonder people are unhappy. Remember, to sustain the empire, it is necessary to keep citizens in a generalized feeling of insecurity and powerlessness. Finally, we can follow the advice suggested by psychologists who study faulty thinking like confirmation bias and illusion of explanatory depth. To counteract faulty thinking, or at least modify it, we might spend less time pontificating and more time trying to work through the implications of policy proposals. If we did some research, we'd realize how clueless we are about most issues and maybe moderate our views. This, researchers write, may be the only form of thinking that will shatter the illusion of explanatory depth and change people's attitudes. We're Unitarian Universalists. We know how to do research. In this time and space, we need to take a deep breath and ground ourselves by remembering that the American impulse toward empire is only one side of the coin. The impulse toward democracy still beats. If we pay attention beyond the media-fed drumbeat of fear, we can see that that beat is getting stronger. We still question our leaders. We still emphasize ethics over doctrine in our commitment to justice. And we still succumb to what Cornel West calls a tragic-comic commitment to hope. A tragic-comic commitment to hope. These three factors, questioning, justice, and hope, are the spiritual wellsprings of a reinvigorated democracy and are also basic to religious liberalism. This is the message of healing and hope our prophetic social justice practice brings to the world. Now, we need to carry that message out into the public square, to the corner of church and state. If you can't march, you can write. If you can't write, you can talk. You can listen. You certainly can vote. You can vote your values. And when we are scorned, threatened, targeted, let us remember that we have a community here in Unitarian Universalism where we can rest, bind up our wounds, tell our stories, and refresh each other with laughter and hope. May we have the bold courage to make it so. Amen. And now please rise and body your spirit for closing hymn number 157, Step by Step, the Longest March. We'll sing it twice. step the longest march can be won, can be won. Many strong can form an arch, singly none, singly none. When I wish still, cross the water, turn a mill, singly none, singly none. In preparation for our closing, let us reach out to each other in whatever way is comfortable. Go from this sacred space, determined to find the courage to issue dissenting opinions in love. Go with the optimism to embrace questioning, justice, and hope. Go, resolved to love the hell out of this world. And when you go, go in peace.
Salam and shalom. Leave this place knowing that you are good and knowing that you are loved.
Blessed be. Take your light and your dark and your love from this place. Share them with the world and stay safe until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you, and please join us in the lobby for some coffee time. And thank you,
Thank you.
Reverend Janet.